Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with speaker, salesman, and survivor Mike Wyszynski. He is a born salesman and a fabulous speaker. Blindness might be new to him, but his strength and optimism are not. Humor adds to his casual ease on difficult subjects like adult blindness, daily experiences of marginalized individuals, and those with physical disabilities. Well-versed in the topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion, overcoming barriers or disability issues in the workplace, he is full of wisdom in this modern world coming from an older world. It's a great story. Enjoy.
Hey, Mike, it's Joe Dimino.
Hey, good to meet you. It's
good to meet you.
Sharon gave me a little background. You used to be a sports interviewer?
Yeah, I used to be in sports radio way back in the day. I used to do pre- and post-game production work for the Kansas City Royals and cover the Chiefs and different things.
Are you in Kansas City now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, my first job out of college was at Kansas City, and I lived in originally Overland Park when I first moved there, and then I ended up on Happy Rock, Gladstone. But I love Kansas City. I was there when George Brett and those guys won the World Series back in the day, way back in. I guess it was like 77 or 78.
85 was the time they won that.
What was I doing there?
They went to the series against the Phillies, and they were pretty good there in the 70s, but they didn't win it till 85.
Okay, yeah, you're right. But Brett had a bat arounder. It was great watching them. And I came from Cincinnati at that time when they had Sparky Anderson was down there. They had the big red machine. They had Johnny Bench and Sweet Swing and Tony Perez. It was Cesar Geronimo. And then I won't mention the other guy because everybody all talks about his Hall of Fame problems. But Jose Concepcion. So you were pre and post game stuff.
Yeah, I took phone calls and I kind of was at the station and I was the grunt boy, so I had to go get food for Hereford House because they did advertisements for them. And if they felt charitable enough, they would give me a bone. But half the time I got it without any food. It's radio life. When you were an intern or a grunt, you had to do the lower end stuff and hope for the best.
Is Hereford House still there?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I used to go to Winstead's and have their hamburgers. Down the. So yeah, I love Kansas City. It was at that time it was a unspoken jewel. Nobody knew about it, but it grew up. Last time I was there, it's like wow, pretty crowded.
Yeah, I went down to the NFL draft here about a month ago. I could not believe that it was Kansas City. I just sat there in front of Union Station with it all done up, and I was like, oh my, because I was wondering how in the world are we going to handle a World Cup? But after seeing the draft, I was like, we got this. We're good. We grew up.
All right, cool. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, what are we going to talk about in this podcast? What would you like to discuss?
I just want to get into your life. I just want to get into some anecdotes. I was kind of throwing out some things about George Foreman, but I really want to get into what has made you tick, what's made you go throughout your life. Just a conversation about, getting to the root of who you are and what you do.
Okay. Well, what did Sharon tell you about me?
Well, you have everything on Podmatch, so I went through your bio. I'm ready. I mean, I got the background, and I'll cover that as we get into it. But we'll cover all of that. So, yeah. So you got a bio on there, and I grabbed a bunch of information off of it. So, I know you're a sales guru, and you've been around for a long time. So, yeah.
You never want to promote you're a sales guru because people just run the other direction.
Not me. Not a journalist. We run right towards the fire.
Okay, great. So what did you do after that? After the sports radio?
Well, I saw what it was like on the inside. To be honest with you, I didn't like the way I just didn't like the world and the culture. It was just real condescending, real the people didn't make that much money. They got too many ulcers early on. It was a toxic environment. I was like, I can't do this. And I was covering the Royals at the time when Hal McRae was there, and it was a dark time for the Royals. It was during that infamous time where he threw all the tapes off his deck. But just honestly, the people that I was working with, they just weren't nice, man. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm not going to chase the coattails of these prima donnas that are making way too much money and have people around me that want to be that but don't have the talent to be that, and then take their ego and inflate it. I couldn't do it. So I got out and I got into a myriad of things. I got into marketing. I was doing, working in the home health industry, doing marketing and stuff. And then I got grandfathered into IT, and that's what I do. My day job is an IT technician for a school district in Kansas City. And, on the side, I do podcasting, and I'm a visual artist and a writer. And then the way I got back into radio was one day I had a construction on my property put in the pool, and it was a really rough construction summer. So I happened to go to a thrift store and found one of those Radio Shack raccoons that have a radio in its belly. I buy it, nostalgic. I bring it home. I hang it up on my new porch. I turn on the show, and it's called The Neon Beat by John Christopher. And they play by Wilbur, the Kansas City rendition. And it's just a great show. The guy has a great approach. So I reach out, and I said, hey, I love your show. I was listening to it. And and I was doing part-time journalism at the time. So I interviewed him. And we go through it. He asks about my history and says, hey, I live 5 blocks away from you. Why don't you come by one time with a script and we'll do a show? And it just totally blindsided me. I'm like, all right. So I picked jazz, and I've been doing it ever since. That was 2011. I just did my 800th show. I've done thousands of interviews with musicians all over the world. And just last year, I joined this new platform with Podmatch, and I've been doing interviews with people all over the world, and I love it.
Oh, man, I'm so glad that Sharon got me connected with you, because I spent November, December, January, not all of November, and right into February in South Africa. And I was doing some work down there, and I met this guy called Mac. His real name is Macquarie, and he's a Zulu, and he works as a production guy on a radio station, and I call him the King of Kyalami. This guy can play strong safety for any team in the NFL. He's like lean and but 6'4". I mean, you do not want to be messing with the Zulus, right? Anyways, he wants to come to the United States with his wife Amanda. And when I was down there, the way I met them is I needed somebody to navigate me around down there, and the person that was coordinating was Mike. We got this lady called Tandy, and Tandy was a gem, and she's Zulu. All these people were Zulu, and they're just the most well-spoken and spiritual people. They're not what you expected, what I expected, right? And just different. Anyways, he wants to come over here, and I'm thinking, well, what can I get him to do? And I listen to the radio here, and the thing I don't like about radio now is, and I could be missing the boat entirely because I'm not that, high-tech adept, is they don't announce who the performers are. They just play the music.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, they got this one song which is very African. I cannot find out who the artists are. And I try to call the KFR or whatever it is in Kalamazoo, and you can't get through. It's just robots. Leave a message or go online, and I'm thinking, man, how can I just find out who they are? And then it's Town Square Radio or something they're an affiliate of that. But I want to get some of these groups down there in Africa to put a tape together and get it played over here. And I don't know the first thing about doing that, right? But so I was going to call Mac and say, hey, Mac, put a demo tape together or something. and I'll see if I can't get it played, because there's so much babble that goes on these radio stations, like people talking about what aspirin they're taking in the morning or whatever. It's like, I don't want to hear that stuff.
No.
You know what I'm saying? But I can see why you got out of it, actually.
Yeah, that's what I was getting away from. Yeah, and I'm always really big. My whole thing about what I do in radio with jazz is that I always talk about the musician and the backstory. So I always have a bridge between songs, and you would never hear a song without me saying who it is, whether it's a lead-in or it's an expose coming out. So yeah, that's bad practice right there when you don't do something like that. But yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I got back into it, because my friend John Christopher, who has the Neon Beat, he does the American Songbook, he has a vision that's very similar to mine, and that's why we do it. And we're creating our own reality, and we're in an era where you can do that, so it's all good.
Yeah, I've got some connections back here in Battle Creek, because this used to be kind of a hub for artists. Battle Creek was for all sorts of innovative stuff. It was like a destination for health, and that's how Kellogg got his start. Was people coming here to get healthy, and then they, deep fried some corn kernels and came up with, sugar frosted flakes and made gazillions.
Yep. That's it.
Crazy story.
Absolutely.
Well, so what do you do? Do you interview all these different types of artists?
Yeah, my whole idea of having my show is that I interview the musicians to get the actual story from them. When I started this show, I'm like, I'm not going to just get online and read books and encyclopedias and whatever and get this. I'm going to get the information from the artists. So I interview the artists and I put clips of what they talk about, and then I actually put the full interview up. So they're telling the story. And so that's a part of what I do. That's my niche, so to speak, in doing jazz radio.
Do you want a connection to South Africa?
If you want, please do send me over that information. I would love to. In fact, it's funny, my wife's name is Amanda.
Uh-huh.
So you had mentioned his wife was Amanda, so it's wild. But yeah, please do. When we're done, send me over whatever contact information you have, and I'd be more than happy to get a hold of him.
Okay, I'll do it. He's a really cool guy. I was so touched by these people. I actually have Amanda doing some remote work for me, because the exchange rate is like 20 South African rand for $1.
Wow.
So I mean, I don't like outsourcing overseas, but it's a really cool way for me to help them out over there. They have a 70% unemployment rate in Johannesburg.
It's interesting you mentioned how spiritual and grounded and just how beautiful they are. There's a musician named Naduzo Makatiki, and he's a very up-and-coming, prominent South African pianist. And I interviewed him a while back, and he happened to come through Kansas City. Somehow they got him here. I don't know how. But I actually met him, and they did meet and greets, and he talked. And, I mean, he transcends any regular realm of human consciousness that I can even imagine. Like, the way he was speaking was so grounded and spiritual and open and loving and intelligent. It was like he came from another planet. I couldn't believe how wondrous this human was. So I get it. I get it. When you said that, I instantly thought of him.
We've become, I hate to make a generality, but we've become a materialistic culture. We're dialectic materialists, right? It's the old Marxist Engels principle that you rub two pieces of rock together and you're going to get an idea, and it's missing that component of the spiritual reality. And I'll give an example. So I'm down there and I've got to re-up my visa because I'm staying down there too long. And I'm walking up this hill and I'm totally blind and I'm with Tandy and it's hot. And Johannesburg, I thought it was going to be like, it's Serengeti or something, but it's actually really high. It's a mile-high city. So you get, it's hot and you get dehydrated. So we're walking up this hill, and there's these people off to the right, spading like on a hedge or something. And Tandy says, "Mike." I said, "Yes." She said, they want to meet you. Right? So there's two people over there working like gardeners, and they want to just meet me. And so I said, "Okay," right? And I thought, man, because I lived in L.A. for a long time. I said, you'd never have two landscape gardeners reach out to meet you in L.A. They're not going to say, "Hey, we just want to meet you." And I just chatted them up. "What's your name?" "My name is William," and the other guy's name was Aziki, right? And they just, we just chatted for about 3 minutes. But it's like they have time to interact. They have time to just be there as a being. They're not, and I know what you're talking about with this. And it's a component we have to get back into our culture. We have to get out of the tech. We have to get that back in. It's so missing right now. And anyways, that's cool. I'm going to get you his information and send me the name of that new artist. Maybe I hear that. Maybe that's the song I hear. He does this a low, 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 a no, 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 no type of repetitious.
Yeah. I will definitely send it over to you for sure. But let's dig into a little bit of your life here. Let's get to the essence of what you do. If I was to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids at a career day, and one of them looked up and asked you, "What do you do for a living?" how would you answer them?
I'd say, I'd ask them a question right away. Actually, I'd say, "Well, let me tell you what I like to do," and then I'd flip it right back and I'd say, "What do you like to do? What makes you feel really happy?" I'd ask a grade school kid. And typically, well, I like to draw. And then I'd say, "Why do you like to draw?" "Well, I like to create stuff." Or, "I like to wait. Or I like to help my mom." Right? And I'd say, "Well, what I do is I like to help people. Because that's what drives me." When for a grade school kid, I wouldn't say drive. I'd say that's what makes me happy. And I remember a time when my dad and I were working in the backyard, and my dad was a hard-working guy, right? Because he grew up, running a farm when he was only 10 years old. But I was working with him all day in the yard. At the end of the day, he gave me a ride in the wheelbarrow. And I remember looking up at the stars, and at that time there were no ground lights where I lived, and the stars were beautiful. And I remember just asking, why am I here? And I got an answer. And it was, you're here to help. And so what I do is I help people. There's lots of things people don't understand about, getting on in the world. That's why you go to school. But I do insurances to make sure that people don't get hurt, or when they do get hurt or something bad happens, then they've got money to make sure that they don't, use all their money for something that's no fun. So that's what I do. I do insurances, and I help people understand what they're getting so they get the best deal. And, do you understand how that would be, that you'd like to help people? I usually get agreement. And invariably, that's what I would say to kids.
So oh yeah, no, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Just strengthen up that button of help.
Absolutely. So when you were in the third grade, when you were a kid, what did you have a dream about becoming? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, interesting story. I'll tell you this. when I was in the third grade, my mom was English. My dad was Polish, obviously, you can tell by the last name. But I got interested in Abraham Lincoln. It was Abraham Lincoln or President's Day or something. So I went home and I said, Mom, I got to learn the Gettysburg Address. And she said, Michael, the Gettysburg Address, you're in the third grade. And I said, I have to learn the Gettysburg Address. And she said, why? I said, because I want to. So I memorized in the third grade the Gettysburg Address.
Mm.
And she made me a little cotton beard, put magic marker or ink on it or something, make it black, and I gave it to the third grade class. Now, in the third grade class was a best friend of mine, Larry Sullivan. And Larry Sullivan was this incredible athlete. He could walk on his hands, like for 10 yards. And he eventually went to the Nationals at college, but he was fourth in the state in wrestling, and he got a bad call in the semifinals. But you know, that was Larry. And I got knocked out of the wrestling tournament pretty early. Larry was trying to console me, and he said, Mike, you know, when you did the Gettysburg Address in the third grade, that was so, you know, impressive. I said, Larry, I don't want to talk about the third grade. You're just trying to make me feel good, right? Now let's talk about Beth Walker or something, right? So anyhow, always stayed in touch with Larry. And we just had that, you know, talk about a spiritual connection. He'd be having a hard time or something, and I'd know it. And I just always call him up. And so recently, and this is only a couple of years ago, I got to call Larry, see what's going on with him, right? And I called him, no answer. Went to his voicemail. I thought he's probably visiting his sister in Denver. Called him again. No, he didn't call me back. So then and I kept nagging at me. So I called him again, and this lady picked up. I said, hey, where's Larry? He says, well, he's right here, Mike. But here, I'll put him on the phone. So he comes on the phone, and I said, Larry, what have you been doing? And he says, what, stroke. He'd had a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, man, this is a drag. And he could barely talk. I said, well, look, hang in there, man. I'll call you back. I don't know, 2-3 weeks later, I called him back. And I said, hey, Larry, how's it going? He says, well, Mike, I'm, and you know, halting like that. I'm doing a lot better. And the speech was like that, right? I said, oh, man, you sound 100% better, Larry. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I do therapy. They have me memorize something, and then I have to give it back. He said, Mike, it's the Gettysburg Address. So, anyhow, that was what was the question? I even forgot.
No, you got it. I just wanted to know what you wanted to be when you were a kid. You answered it.
Yeah, I want to help people. That's been my big thing. Insurance was like, when I get out of school, I had a job selling surgical gloves and kits. I got that interview. I was turned down at college because I didn't want to get up early and go to the job interviews. But I got hired by American Hospital Supply Corporation, and they popped me into Kansas City. And I had worked construction all my, high school days. I really wasn't a salesman, right? And but my region manager was a cool guy, Jay Bale. I said, Jay, what do I do? He said, look, Mike, go in and if you talk to a nurse or anesthesiologist, ask them to help you out. Explain it. And so I learned how to do an epidural anesthesia at KU Medical Center. I learned how to do all these medical procedures or whatever from the docs, and I got really into it. Then I got promoted, got moved to Houston, and selling rubber gloves and medical kits, and I just walked into a really sweet situation because Houston was booming. The oil crisis was in. Everybody was moving to the Sun Belt, and I just blew it out. sales-wise. And I was probably in line to be a national sales manager. But I could not, I kind of like you, it's like, I don't like seeing what's going on with all these procedures and stuff. And it's like a procedure would come out in JAMA. Next thing you know, we were selling all these kits to fill that procedure. And I'm like, and I actually asked our president, Lyman Lance, at that time, who was a real good man. I said, Lyman, JAMA comes out with the procedure. We start selling the kits. It is all of a sudden all these procedures are needed? And he said, no. He said, and then he related to the procedure of radical mastectomies, because that's what was going on. Breast implants were crazy. He says, if you ask some of the doctors in LA, 70% of them are not necessary. And I thought, man, I don't want to be involved. And I was a young man, still idealistic, right? So I said, no, I'm not going to do this. Plus, I had to go into critical care units and stuff, and it was dreary for me.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's what kind of drives me. And then I got into insurance. Really kind of happenstance way to fell into that, and that's what I like doing. I like helping business owners. I've had two of my companies go Inc. 500, and I've been their insurance broker all the time. One guy started with he and his wife and 7 1099 employees, and he grew it up to 188 employees, and then sold it for 8 figures last year or 2 years ago.
Wow.
But so anyhow, that's what I like to do. But
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
Yeah, and then Sharon and I did some caper one time. I did this thing with a campaign to promote this Better Values book and Better Choices and that kind of thing. And the biggest draw in California in the boxing world, bigger than Muhammad Ali. That may have changed by now, but at the time, not that Muhammad Ali would have changed, but was Jorge Paez. Have you ever heard of Jorge Paez?
Yeah.
Maramero, the flipper, the guy that flipped. He would go in these wild costumes, and then he like 9 times or 12 times defended his junior lightweight title, right? So I thought, man, I got to get him behind this Better Choices, idea, because get kids off drugs and stuff. And he was set up to fight De La Hoya in the MGM Grand, and so I went to De La Hoya because everybody knew De La Hoya, the Olympic champion, and De La Hoya I couldn't get to him, right? But Paez I got to, and he said, I said, it's anti-drug, and he said, oh, no droga? I said, yeah. He says, okay, I'll do it. So we put the logo on his robe, right? And then he was wild, but ended up I ended up going to an interview, a pre-fight interview, and Jim Lampley and Larry Merchant, those are the guys that used to do the boxing thing. I don't know if you recall that.
Yeah.
And then George Foreman was in there standing around. He's like a giant. He's way bigger than you think. I reached out to shake his hand. He gave me his finger. Right? It was like, oh my God. But anyways, Jorge is there with an interpreter, right? And I'm thinking, Jorge understands English, but he's there with an interpreter. And Lampley comes up, and it's early in the morning, and somebody's already passing a glass of booze around. I'm like, it's about 10 o'clock. I'm going, this is interesting. But Lampley asked Jorge, have you been training hard for this fight? It's a big fight. And I'm like, that's like, I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's kind of an idiotic question. It's just right. But he says it to the interpreter, And then interpreter says to Paez, relays the message, and Paez kind of tilts his head, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I eat French fries and burritos, right?" Like, to gain weight because he's coming up in weight to fight De La Hoya. And then I said, "Well, this is weird." And then Lampley says, "Well, Jorge, you 9 times or 12 times, I can't remember what it is. I think it was 9 times defended your junior lightweight title. Why are you taking this fight? Is it for the money?" And then he says that. The interpreter leans over, and I know that Paez understands this, right? Because I've spoken to him. He understands English. Anyhow, so Paez looks at him and he goes, "I'm taking the fight to win," right? And then Lampley does it again. He says, "Well, Jorge, what have you done with all your money?" Which I thought was rather insulting, right? And then without the interpreter, Paez looks right at him and says, "Everything I could." Just, like I don't need the interpreter to tell me what you're up to. But it was interesting to observe what goes on in these in that brutal sport. And it's like, oh man. And then much to my dismay, Paez got knocked out in the second round.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it was
a great story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in this storied life that you've led with so many things that have happened, what are you the proudest of that you've done?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't really know. I'd say the sales thing, I'm not that proud of. I wasn't working that hard. There was a windfall where I had a huge year, like almost doubled. Well, I made almost 70% higher than largest quota in the country. But part of it was somebody closed the deal. Hospital Corporation of America closed the deal to outfit some hospital in Riyadh. And because Houston was a port city, it went through my distributorship. It wasn't because of my, phenomenal sales ability. It was just luck. The best things I've done for people are when I've just one-on-one got them through something or got them sorted out. And that's really, there's quite a few of those where I've sat down and worked with somebody and explained something to them, and they have some kind of realization about, what was tying them up, what was tangling them up. And that was what I was most proud of. And then I'd say one of my proudest moments was a good friend of mine lost his wife, and I knew her really well. It's on a purely professional level, but personally I knew her. She was really an incredible person. And he asked me to give a like a eulogy for her. And I was like, Dan, I'm like, I don't know if I'm the right guy. And he said, no, I want you to do it. Right. So I gave one, and I had been reading a lot, and I read this thing by Herman Melville, actually, and I was not a Moby Dick fan particularly, and his better book is Tai P, not, but there's some risque stuff in that, so that's why we don't get to read it in high school. Anyways, in it he gives this quote. He says, backward or forward, eternity is the same.
Yeah.
And already we have lived. Already we have been the nothing we dread to be. Like, nobody wants to be nothing. Nobody wants to be dead.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought, I gave that quote. I said, already we've been the nothing we dread to be.
Yeah.
But in the interim, between start and continue, and I gave the lady's name, lived a beautiful life. And that, I was short and sweet. Someone told me, get up, say what you wanted to, and sit down. So I was able to kind of encapsulate, and I was so honored by that I was able to, because this lady had done incredible work for thousands of people, and there was a full battery of people listening. So I hate to say that proudest moment of my life was given in a eulogy, but it's right up there.
Yeah. So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, colleagues, clients, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Man, I wish I knew.
There you go.
I think that's a long-term philosophical, who the heck am I? What am I doing here? Right? Mm-hmm. And it's also like what I find about myself, because I've gone through some life-changing events. Going totally blind was, a real trip. And I would say, you can get introverted. A person can get, I call it like interiorized into your own world and get looking inward. And that is, for me, that has never been a very successful action, right? And if I got to get myself going, get myself back in the game, and that's I think there's two things I operate on. A couple I call them stable datums that keep me going. One is there must be a game. You have to have a game going on, and it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. Everybody can win, but you have to be playing a game. And then the second one is what you say about yourself is law. If you say, "Oh, I can't do that," you can't do it. If you say, "I'm afraid to, get up and talk in front of people," you'll be afraid. So those are two stable datums I have. There must be a game, and what you say about you is law. And then the other thing that I've noticed is that if I do get interiorized, if I do get down and out, which is not very often, all right, the best thing to do is go help somebody else.
Absolutely.
Yep. So I think you've probably run into that too when you were in sports radio.
Yeah.
You meet some of these guys at prima donnas, and it's all me, right? And they're not pleasant to be around.
Yeah.
So if I would go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. No, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, I hope I answered your question. That's all.
You did. Absolutely, you did. Yeah. Mike, if anyone out there wants to learn more about you, anything pertaining to your world, where's the best place for them to go?
Oh, man. It's all under construction. Well, eventually, real soon it'll be probably my LinkedIn, and my website is like, it was really pretty much mothballed while I went through my blind thing, and I'm going to have to reconstruct that. But they can go to my website, mwiagency.com, and I'm going to get a little bit more information that Sharon's helping me with. She's excellent at what she does, and I'm going to put some stuff up there because I'm still very active in, what I do. I do pensions and I do retirement planning, and I'm doing some work for special needs organizations. There's a great organization called Seedlings, Braille Books for Children, and I've donated a little money to them, and I'm gonna do some special work. So I've got great connections. The one thing I do have is unbelievable connections. Advisors that I've worked with for years that are expert in all that stuff, because I can't keep up with all the changes. I mean, I do keep up with my niche, but if I need somebody to do a special needs trust, I got to go to a really good attorney. If I need somebody to look at what's going on with all the pension changes, the Secure Act, no matter which administration is going to shift things around, because that whole area is under a dynamic tumult right now. So that's my website, mwiagency.com, and it'll soon be expanded into maybe a broader public.
Well, that's great. You're doing work with the special needs community. I have an 18-year-old son who's on the autism spectrum, Miles. So I'm always appreciative of, the folks out there that lend a hand. And I've been in this community for quite a while. So I'm always grateful for it.
That's interesting that you said that, because one of my clients, long-term client, good friend, has got this company that apparently there's some benefit from camel's milk for autistic children.
Wow.
And so she has this, it's kind of struggling along because, you don't run into the corner drugstore and get a gallon of camel's milk, but she's got a company called Camelicious, and it's designed, she has a real niche for people that have autistic children. They're trying it. Yeah, interesting. I don't want to I'm not doing a commercial for Camelicious, but that's...
Every little bit helps. No, I totally get it. Mike, it was great to meet you. Thank you for opening up your world. Thank you for preening a little bit into mine. It was a great symbiotic exchange. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, I really would like to hear more about you. But send me that information about what you do, and I'll get you this information of my guy in South Africa.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Absolutely. I will get you over links, and I'll look forward to that. And again, best of luck with everything, Mike. Thanks for your time today, man.
You bet. Take care. Have a great day. Go Chiefs.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.